Good afternoon, everyone. Could I encourage you all to take seats, please? You're welcome to move further forward where there is information on the desks. It doesn't go all the way to the back. If you don't want to, fine, that's up to you. I'm not going to make you, but there aren't enough leaflets to go all the way to the back of the room. So if you want to pick up one of our leaflets on the Arctic commitment, which I'll introduce later, you need to come a bit further forward. First of all, I'm just going to apologise. I've got a cold, so I'm going to try not to cough and splutter too much into the microphone, but I do apologise if I do. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Pleased to see so many faces here. We were a little bit worried at one point as I was told that the airport was full of people leaving and new people coming in, but for the science sessions. So we were a little worried we might have got caught in the crossover, but it's great to see so many faces here. The Say No to HFO side event is being hosted by Hurtigruten, Bellona and the European Climate Foundation. And the purpose of this afternoon's side event is to launch a historic initiative, the Arctic Commitment, which aims to provide better protection for the Arctic environment by banning the use of heavy fuel oil by ships operating in the Arctic region. As most of you have probably seen, there's some food and coffee at the back. Please feel free to get up during the session and help yourself if you would like more. We just ask that you try and do so quietly so that we don't disturb discussions that are going on. The other thing is, after we've had some presentations and the signing of the first two signatures, we're going to move this microphone forward slightly and have question and answer and discussion with the panel. If I could ask people to come to the microphone, please, to ask their questions, or to make any statement they want to make, and then it will be recorded. We're recording all the proceedings. First of all, then, it gives me great pleasure to just welcome our 5 panelists. We're going to start with Hallstein Havåg. I apologize if I pronounce any names wrong, especially with the cold. Hallstein is with the Bellona Foundation, and he's the Director of Policy and Research. Secondly, we'll hear from Daniel Skjeldam, from the CEO of Hurtigruten. And then we'll listen to Tor Christian Sletner from the Norwegian Shipowners Association, followed by Bernice Notenboom, Arctic explorer and documentary filmmaker. And finally, Christian Wolff, the Managing Director of the European Climate Foundation. Oops. What we're going to do, just very quickly explain the structure of the side event, and then we'll get on with the first panelist. So we're going to have the 5 presentations and then go to the signing and then have a question and answer session. If there are any other people or people representing bodies that would like to come up and sign the Arctic Commitment at the end of the session, we'll invite them to come and do so as we begin to wrap up. So that's the plan for the next couple of hours. I hope that suits everybody, and we'll get going. So Hallstein, would you like to come join us for the first presentation? And I have to now climb up here.
Thank you very much, Sean. The Bellona Foundation have been working on issues related to shipping and the Arctic for decades. For tens of years, we've looked into that. And this is a very important step for us, to be able to find a coalition that could drive an actual ban on heavy fuel oils in a very much growing market. And let's be clear, the market or the size of shipping in the Arctic today isn't vast, but it is significant. And we know that, okay? This is better? Okay, wonderful. I won't start screaming then. So, we know that about 44% of the ships that are traveling in the Arctic today use heavy fuel oil, or ship heavy fuel oil. But the volume, the consumption of fuel, heavy fuel oil represents 76%. And as larger ships move into this area, we expect that the growth, if gone unchecked, could be significant. So what's driving this growth? Well, it is of course destination transport. Transport to destinations in the Arctic is significant today. And tourism is on a great rise. There are other modes of transport that are important in the area as well. And we know that we're on the starting point of a very high increase in transport over the next years in this specific area. So this, we feel, is the perfect time to get regulations in place, create a level playing ground, and have the starting point for actually a better and more sustainable shipping in the Arctic in the years ahead. Because whichever way this goes, and predicting the future is difficult, we know that also transcontinental shipping, as the sea ice, summer sea ice recedes, is going to be significant in the future. How much, we don't know. But the point of this is that this traffic has a larger relative impact when happening in the Arctic than other places in the world. There are two major reasons why we say that heavy fuel oil should be banned in this area. And of course, the large point for us as an environmental NGO is linked to risk. The risk of accidents, the risk of oil spill. And risk is a simple function of the probability that an accident will occur and the consequences of that accident. And the risks of things happening, accidents happening in the Arctic, are higher than other places. And the consequences will be vast. The lack of infrastructure is very obvious in these areas in the world. And we know that heavy fuel oil, if spilled, could make damaging effects on a very sensitive ecosystem. But another point that is well made is black carbon emissions from these heavier types of fuel oil. And when burnt and when emitted in the Arctic, it has a much higher impact than other places in the world as well, reducing the albedo effect from the ice and also absorbing heat in this area, accelerating ice melting. Many of the effects on oil spills in the Arctic are unknown. But a major point to be made here is that the ecosystems in this region of the world are more sensitive. There are fewer species on each trophic level. And if one level in the food chain is damaged, it can have vast effects on higher levels in the ecosystem as well. So the risks of damage and lasting damage is great. Heavy fuel oil spill in this area will emulsify, will fall down to the sediments at the bottom, and be there for decades ahead, continuing the damaging effect over a longer period of time in this part of the world than in other areas. We're not here today to say that we should not have shipping or should not have activity in the Arctic. But we should definitely apply the best instruments, the best regulations, and the best technology available in the Arctic first. The Arctic, a sensitive area as it is, could be a testing ground for new technology, hybrid and electric solutions, bio-LNG as a substitute for the fuels used today, building out infrastructure for shore charging, and of course enabling electrification of shipping and transport as well as the opportunities of onboard renewable production, at least in the summer period when the sun is always shining, are one of several opportunities. But these are things that Christoph Wolff will cover later today. We are very happy to be here today. And we want to stress the point that this is really low-hanging fruit. If we create a level playing ground today, saying that heavy fuel oil is banned from shipping in the Arctic, then that is a clear regulation statement that could create long-term clarity for industries that want to grow and increase in this area. Further on, as we're on the cusp of a much higher activity in the Arctic, which could spin off many positive effects as well, we want to underline that doing this today enables us to protect larger parts of the world in the future. So we're very happy to have this coalition today. Thank you very much for coming. I look forward to the discussion and the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Hallstein. That was wonderful, thank you. We're going to go straight on with presentations, as we'll have plenty of time for question and discussion later. So if I could just invite Daniel to come up and tell us a little bit about the role and the risks for commercial operators operating in the Arctic, and to talk perhaps a little bit about how the cruise industry might respond to the predicted changes. Thank you.
Thank you. You hear me well back there? Without the microphone? Good, I'll try. So very few companies experience the effects of the climate change on an everyday basis closer than us, because we're operating in some of the world's most pristine waters, from pole to pole, and of course the legendary coastal route along the coast of Norway gives us a unique insight. But it also gives us opportunities and not the least obligations to make a significant impact as a company. Because the industry, the cruise industry, the tourism industry needs to change, and the shipping industry needs to change. In Hurtigruten, we made some fundamental decisions in how we operate. Despite the substantial extra costs, none of our ships use heavy fuel oil, for a very good reason. Again, it's a very big cost for us, but we don't see any other reason or any other options than to do this with the environment that we're sailing in. So it's a paradox that the lack of regulations allow shipping companies to bring more pollution, more emissions, and intolerable risk to the region that needs less. It does not make sense that heavy fuel oil is banned in Antarctica, while a lack of regulation allows operators to switch to cheap, polluting heavy fuel oil when entering the vulnerable Arctic. First, let's look at some uplifting facts. Tourism is one of the most promising industries in the Arctic. In northern Norway, tourism employs more people than the primary sectors, including fisheries and aquaculture altogether. On Svalbard, tourism has for the first time ever surpassed mining in terms of turnover. And we do see the same pictures all over the Arctic. The Arctic attracts a special kind of tourists, a conscious, well-educated traveler with high demand and expectations. This kind of expedition tourism is one of the fastest growing service sectors in the world. A kind of tourism handled right that can be sustainable for the entire future. The development of this kind of tourism in the Arctic will continue. We've only seen the start. We know because we have sailed in the Arctic for almost 125 years and seen trends and climate change over these years. Hurtigruten's values are based on strong innovative traditions established by the Norwegian polar heroes and their vessels, such as Fram, Gjøa, and Maud. Through innovation, adaptation, and exemplary leadership, these ships and their crew succeeded where others had failed for centuries. Amundsen and Nansen pushed further than anyone had gotten before them, and they returned home safely with ship and crew. What was true then, which is also true today, there is no room for mistakes in the Arctic. One major oil spill can put the whole industry and entire ecosystems in jeopardy. The question we need to continuously ask ourselves is the Arctic well prepared to meet the demand for tourism in a sustainable way? The answer, or rather an inconvenient truth, for the most part, no. The Arctic is not prepared for what is coming. This is one of my concerns, the picture up here. This is how you can see why tourism in the Arctic is booming. I took this one myself from the deck of MS Fram into Ilulissat on Greenland, 5 o'clock in the morning. A beautiful, beautiful scenery. It will draw a lot of people, this kind of scenery. But mass tourism has no place in the Arctic. Mass tourism fueled by low costs and no regulations. We need sustainable tourism in the Arctic. And this is one of my other concerns. As you can see, this is heavy fuel oil. It's a toxic tar-like sludge. And you've probably seen the pictures of earlier disasters, Exxon Valdez to name one. It could happen again in the future. Heavy fuel oil breaks down extremely slow, especially in the cold Arctic climate. And it is nearly impossible to clean up in the event of a spill in cold waters in the Arctic. But still, nearly half the ships currently operating in the Arctic runs on this. It's just unbelievable. Half the ships operating in the Arctic run on this. So that's why we stopped using HFO a number of years ago. And this is also why we're calling for stricter regulations. So what is the solution to this? We hope that these beauties that you see up here could be part of the solution. It will definitely take the industry a great step forward. This is our new groundbreaking explorer ships, MS Roald Amundsen and MS Fridtjof Nansen. When they're launched in 2018 and 2019, they will be the first ever hybrid-powered expedition cruise ships. They will actually be the world's first hybrid-powered passenger ships. They will be fitted with large battery packs, enabling them to sail silent and emission-free in the world's most pristine waters. In the first years, it will be only minutes or up to an hour. But as technology is developed, we've put aside more space to introduce new battery packs. And we can extend the battery-powered sailing time up to 5, 6, even up to 7, 8 hours when technology on batteries for ships are developed further. And this is maybe the most important. From day one, the battery hybrid power will enable us to cut emissions significantly by doing so-called peak shaving and battery-powered sailings in the ports. In addition, these ships feature a variety of groundbreaking, environmentally friendly technical details, such as state-of-the-art heat recovery and waste management systems, making these the most environmentally friendly explorer cruise ships the world has ever seen. Why? Because we think this is the only way to operate in the pristine waters of the Arctic. Hurtigruten is leading the way, and we hope that other operators will follow. We cannot wait until our new builds start arriving in 2018 or when eventually others will follow. We try to move the industry forward through leading by example. We work every day very hard to cut emissions and make our operation even more sustainable through small things like removing plastic bags from all our ships or do all the little things in our day-to-day operation that saves the environment. Soon we'll be using shore power in all the major Norwegian ports along the coasts. We're spending millions to replace propellers to make propulsion more effective. We're not using heavy fuel oil, and we work to promote stricter environmental standards and regulations in the Arctic. Whenever I speak about sustainability, I'm always met with the same argument. You are part of the problem. And I'd like to turn that around. We are part of the solution. We cannot completely cut out business in the Arctic. We cannot take away the livelihood of all the many people that lives in the Arctic. We need to make a sustainable development. So we recognize and understand that the shipping and cruise industry is responsible for major CO2 emissions. But by moving the industry forward and letting our guests be an important part of this mission, we believe we make a difference. In Hurtigruten, we create to make ambassadors on every trip we take. We want to make sure that our guests understand what challenges these areas face today and in the future. Because a lot of our guests live in areas which is part of the problem that is created in the Arctic. Instead of only giving our guests one last look at the Arctic ice or the polar bears, our main focus is to change their mindset, to make them conscious on how they can contribute to sustaining these areas, to share our love and affection for the Arctic. During the last few days here at Arctic Frontiers, I've been meeting with a number of governmental officials and industry leaders. In every meeting, I've been making the same points. Arctic tourism and shipping need stricter regulations, starting with a ban of heavy fuel oil. And uncontrolled growth could lead and end in disaster that jeopardizes the whole industry, the livelihood of the people who live here, and value creation in the Nordic Arctic. And that is the reason why Hurtigruten is spearheading the efforts to create the basis of a highly valuable and sustainable industry in the polar regions. The future of Arctic shipping is emission-free. But as we work our way there with our new ships up front, we need to take action. By signing the Arctic Commitment, we take our commitment to the Arctic one step further, and we hope that the rest of the industry will join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. We'll move straight on then and invite Tor Christian to come up and give a short presentation, offering some further views on the shipping in the Arctic from the perspective of the shipping industry, and hopefully on the future opportunities and risks and the role of future regulation. Thank you.
That's the one. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us here and come to talk on behalf of Norwegian International Shipping. We are very pleased to be here. We are very pleased to present you for our proactive environmental approach and show you the lines we are working after in our daily life. Norwegian shipowners have this joint vision we are sharing, all of us. This is not something we have created on our own desk. This is something we have done through all our 160 shipping companies, representing about 2,000 ships at any time, at any place all over the world. Representing the second most valuable offshore fleet in the world after the US. Representing deep sea shipping going constantly over the oceans and are a part of what the global transport logistics is like. 90% of all the goods are freighted and transported by ships today. We are sharing this vision that we should have no or zero harmful emissions to sea or air. When the Norwegian shipowners are out there lobbying for stricter regulations in the only liable kind of international fora, the International Maritime Organization, the United Nations Shipping Department, so to speak, in London, we are always pointing in the direction of stricter and higher regulations because we believe that Norwegian shipping will have a kind of competitive advantage and be a spearhead for environmental sound development within international shipping. It's meaning that we are aiming for the highest standards within the environmental performance and technology, and of course to promote the highest safety standards for our crew. So why do we do this? Is it purely because of ideological politics, or is it because we believe in it? It's both. We are looked after by a lot of bodies, persons, politicians, NGOs all over the world. And they are in their full right to do so, given the important position we have as the world's largest transporter. IMO is the global regulator of shipping regulations. As an employers organization for 160 shipping companies and 2,000 ships, we are totally dependent on having a global regulator as our regulator. It's a problem for us in our daily life to live after a patchwork of regional regulations all over the world. It's a problem for us to have a regional ban on heavy fuel oil also in the Arctic. It's a problem for international shipping to have emission control zones on east and western part of the United States. It's a problem for international shipping also to have emission control area in the North Sea and in the Baltic Sea. But nevertheless, we support it. In the daily life and in the daily operations of our ships, we have to take care of a patchwork of various regulations. It makes it more expensive, it takes time, and it's not to the best of efficient shipping. Therefore, we need global regulations, and all of these stakeholders you see here displayed are looking after us, coming up with regulations, meaning something about what we are doing, right or wrong, but all of them are we consider all of them, take them on board, and take it as constructive correction on how we are doing our daily business. Why do we look at Arctic from a shipping point of view? What you see here is the traditional international shipping routes between continents. The dotted lines represent the shortage in distance if you go over the North Pole and through the Arctic in one or another way, northeast passage or northwest passage, or straight over the pole given the conditions are right. Time is money in international shipping and in all types of business. If we can short down a voyage from Korea to US with 2 weeks, it means a lot more efficient transport. It means that we have saved money, but it all has to do with that we can do this in a safely and environmentally friendly way. I can say here and now, it's no option for Norwegian shipping companies to go into the Arctic, either it's trans-Arctic destination transport or offshore activities, if there is not a sufficient search and rescue in place. It must be the infrastructure is paramount and fundamental. If we cannot trust a solid search and rescue kind of arrangements between all the circumpolar states, where you have communication in place, you have fixed agreements that you should support and assist each other given an accident, it will not be an option for Norwegian international shipping companies to go in there in a larger kind of extent. But we see that Arctic is interesting. The climate work the world is facing now also points at melting down of ice in the Arctic. That gives some opportunities for some, and we have done some analysis together with the classification societies, DNVGL and others, to see what is the option, what can we do, where are the possibilities, what do we have to do as an add-on, and looking at our experiences from the North Sea and, for instance, oil and gas drilling and the activities we have done there for almost 50 years, what can we do in the Arctic and what's the add-ons? They are displayed here. Very simply, there is always an add-on when you will do activity in the Arctic, always. We have never faced areas for industrial development like this before. It's pristine, it's valuable, and we have to do it with the utmost caution. But we think it's possible, but again, without the search and rescue system in place, without circumpolar agreements between the Arctic countries, without the development of new ports, without good meteorological data, there is no option to go in there to do industrial kind of joint ventures in some scale. Extreme challenges is what we are facing. extreme weather and temperature, ice, darkness, long distances, sensitive areas, environmental challenges. A former colleague of mine is in this room. I used to have the responsibility for the emergency response for the oil spill cleaning in Norway some years ago. We had good plans for almost everything except picking up oil in ice-infested waters. And under these circumstances we are facing here. It's not solved yet. I know there is a lot of initiatives going on around. But again, now as a representative, as head of environment, research and innovation in the Norwegian Shipowners Association, I constantly advise my board, it's not possible to go into the Arctic in an industrial adventure of some scale unless you have search and rescue, communications, meteorological data, oil spill equipment that works in maybe -30, -40, and in extreme weather conditions. It's not an option. You shouldn't do it. And there are no initiatives to go in there today. It's in very large, very small scale. But nevertheless, we know that today there are some 4,000 ships we are talking about going into what we call Arctic today. Out of those 6,000 ships, there are some 16 to 1,800 fishing vessels, about 25% of them. And there are some 40 to 50, taking all vessels in general, going on heavy fuel oil. We believe that the trans-Arctic transport, wherever it starts to be in some scale, with modern ships, modern tankers, modern cruise ships, they are not representing this risk the research director of Bellona talked about. They are modern, they have all kinds of technical equipment, they have double hulls, they are good ships. But the others, couple of hundreds, 2,000 or 3,000 smaller ships going along the coastline, back and forth in all kinds of activity all day around. Maybe that's where we should start to say something about banning fuel oil, heavy fuel oil. The risk for those smaller ones going in their daily traffic will, after our point of view, represent a larger risk than the bigger ships doing the short voyage. We can discuss that days up and down, weeks up and down. But the consequences of a small ship going on, leaving some heavy fuel oil, will be small, but the risk for going on will be high. The risk for the modern huge ships to catch an accident will be small, but the consequences will be large. So it's something we have to discuss in the years to come. We are in process with this in the Norwegian Shipowners Association these times. We have presented a vision for our board. We have said that the trends and our environmental consciousness should lead us to look more closely into the fuel use in the Arctic. Maybe we should go for some kind of regional regulations up there, even though we have a principle view on global regulations. Maybe, we don't know. We are in process. All our members, all our 2,000 ships and 160 shipping companies are discussing this. So let's see what we can come up to. But never forget that the leading star in that work as well are zero harmful emissions to sea or air, and that's our guiding star in that work. These are the business opportunities. You know, looking at international shipping companies and international ship owners, it always smells business, blue suits and cigars. And again, that's why we have pointed out some for you to satisfy your anticipations of what I should say. My last slide would be on the business opportunities. It's a matter of whatever others would also see in the Arctic. Maritime offshore, maybe, trans-Arctic transport, Arctic destination. But this is not options if we don't have this safety in place, if we don't have the infrastructure in place. Because the most important thing is the environment we should leave to our kids and grandkids. And that's our guiding star. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tor Christian. And we'll move straight on. And Bernice, if I could invite you to come up and just tell us a little bit about your experiences in the Arctic and on the front line of travel in the Arctic and your investigations into what you've seen there. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that slide. I want that slide, whoever's it is. It's a beautiful slide. I don't have visuals. I should have, because of course you all like to see how Arctic explorers swim through the North Pole. That's very impressive. But I know you already know these kinds of images. But I want to take you to the Arctic from a different perspective, from somebody who walks on the ice 60 to 80 days sometimes, how long these expeditions last, and what we see while we're out there. I'll get to that in a second. Just a month ago, I was hired as a guide to go to Antarctica on a ship. I was giving lectures about climate change in Antarctica as well as the Arctic. And I know I'm on the wrong continent and I'm in the wrong pole, but bear with me, I'll get to that. While we were getting ready for this expedition, I was sent a manual, the IOTA manual. It's like this thick, 400 pages. I'm sure Hurtigruten knows that manual I'm talking about, because you operate there. And I was reading this manual and I was amazed by the rules and regulations that Antarctica has put into place for cruise ship owners to operate there. Now I'm just going to give you a few examples. For instance, everybody that is leaving the shore, whether you're in Chile or whether you're in Argentina, you have to switch to marine gas fuel, low sulfur diesel fuel, when you hit the 60-second parallel. So just imagine you're a big ship. HFO is nice, it's easy, you can mix it with a bunch of stuff, you blend it, it's perfect, it's cheap, and all of a sudden everything comes to a halt and you have to switch over to this other fuel. Well, it's very complicated, twice as expensive. How do you calculate these costs of that kind of fuel over to your clients? You really can't do that because there is huge competition in Antarctica. You can take cruises for a couple of €1,000. And you need to get all the clients you can have because cruises are expensive and you want everybody on the ship to pay for the bill. Nevertheless, it's mandatory. So, of course, I'm a journalist and I'm very suspicious because I think nobody obeys the rules, right? That's my premise. So it's like I go to the captain on the bridge. It's like, are you sure everybody's switching over to this fuel? He says, oh, yeah. And if you don't, we're right there to watch them and we check them. And sure enough, there are all these checks and balances into place in Antarctica that if someone dares to have the guts to do it differently and not follow the rules, you actually get scolded and you're going to get reported to the authorities in Antarctica and you're banned from Antarctica. That's how strict it is. Now, what I also like, and then I'll go to the Arctic in a second, but what I like is they have this map where everybody in the morning gets together and they call each other up and say, I want to be this disco bay or this bay today, or I want to go and see the fjords in that area. And so it's a visual, pristine environment that everybody wants to secure. With other words, you can only be with one cruise ship at one point at one time, and no one else is allowed to go there. So I was just thinking, if I read through this manual, and me as a guide have to do a lot of things. I have to do tests. I have to know everything about Antarctica before I can even work on one of these ships. But if we can do all these things for secure and safe operation in Antarctica. Why can we not do such a thing in the Arctic? Do you want to that too?
I'll get back to that after.
Hold that thought, because I wanted that, and it's like it's so beautiful, but the self-regulatory aspect of it, that everybody's on top of you if you bend the rules, and they are really vicious about it. They report each other, and then you have no license to operate there anymore. Now, in the Arctic, as a polar explorer, I've never really seen the consequences of shipping. I am usually there in April, March, April. It's usually there's ice. There's not a lot going on because ships can't really operate there. Except in 2014. I was on a trip. I was skiing from the North Pole back to Canada. And I actually found a piece of carbon. I didn't know what it was at the time. You have to be careful in the Arctic. It could be algae, because big icebergs sometimes roll upside down, and then it looks like a black substance, and when you scrape it off you be fooled, to be false alarm, but actually this was really dark black. So I scraped it off, I put it in a little canister, I carried it with me all the way to Canada, and after a few months I shipped it off to a laboratory, and they analyzed it, and they said it's from a ship. And that to me was a wake-up call. It's like, how is it possible when I ski at 89 degrees, or I was at 89 degrees then, how can I find black carbon so high up in the Arctic? Well, it prompted to a really big project in my personal life. I was going to make a film about geopolitical issues about the North Pole, but I kind of set that aside, and I start digging into shipping. And I don't know anything about that world, and I learned a lot in a hurry, because I actually basically learned 3 things. Shipping is secretive. Over the world, most of the shipping companies are family owned. They don't have board of directors. They don't have shareholder meetings that can vote, whether they should go more sustainable. It's very, very tight, and it's very hard to penetrate. So that was the first thing that I discovered. The second one is, of course, it's unregulated. It's out there in the open seas. It's tough to get everybody to come together with some regulations. And then third, it's very polluting. So I made this film called Seablind, The Price of Shipping Our Stuff. And we picked on container shipping because you and I all have been part of shipping with containers. 90% of everything we buy, our chairs, our pens, our jackets, everything comes with a ship. And what has been said earlier, we can't avoid it. We need to work with the shipping industry. And you already said that, sorry, what is your name again? Hallstein from Bellona. It's the low-hanging fruit. Tomorrow it can be different. Tomorrow the entire shipping industry can go more sustainable. Because if you really do the math, the price of a jacket, for instance, that is maybe the shipping cost right now, maybe say $1. Perhaps they're going to be $1.50. And I tell you what, everybody still will be paying that $1.50. It's nothing, because we are transporting 117 million pairs of shoes on a ship in one go, or 20 million pair of refrigerators. The quantities are so gigantic that if you really break it down into good, sustainable shipping, it actually is still affordable for all of us to move that way. Yet we don't have the choice. We, as customers, not even the people that are loading the container ships, don't have a choice. So we are stuck with this industry that doesn't want to change, except, of course, Hurtigruten. We're stuck with this industry that presumes let's just do business as usual because that's what we want to know, and we certainly don't want anybody to rock our boat. And now we're going to add another layer like shipping into the Arctic. I personally think container shipping, that's a long ways away from in the Arctic. Is that a message? It's time to move on. I personally think container shipping is really not where we will see the potential, the dilemmas and the dangers. But cruise ship industry, just know that the shipping in Antarctica has grown so much and is continuing to grow. More people want to go. We have an aging population. They can't walk. They want to be on a ship. They want to see all that, and rightfully so. I think I probably would be one of them myself. So take all that interest into the Arctic. And now then, what kind of a picture would we have? We're going to penetrate further into the Arctic on a ship to see the last iceberg or to see the last polar bear. And all that black carbon, which is contributing 40% of Arctic melt if it falls down on snow, it's huge. That should not be allowed. So, am I against banning HFO in the Arctic? You bet I am. I have seen the detrimental effects of black carbon in Greenland. I've studied it. I know by making this film, talking to all these scientists, how absolutely horrifying it is if we continue doing business as usual. And I just see that the cruise ship industry is going to go in there. We already saw this case of the Serenity cruise this year. Have you noticed that they did it right before the Polar Code came into effect? Yes, they did. What are they going to do next year? They already said they don't want icebreakers of the British Antarctic Survey anymore to support them. They want to do it their own way. I'm nervous about things like that, developments like that, if we don't get a solid plan, such as Antarctica together in the Arctic. That would be my biggest hope. Thanks.
Thank you, Bernice. And I should say especially big thank you to Bernice, because we originally, and in the programme, had another speaker, but she stepped in at the last moment when Sarah fell ill, and also Hallstein as well, who had to step in at the last moment. So thank you very much. Our last speaker then is Christoph Wolff from the European Climate Foundation. I believe you're going to say a little bit more about the future and what it could hold in terms of regulation and improving the situation for the Arctic. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. Listening to my fellow panelists, I don't think there could be a better place for an Arctic commitment to be introduced first time as the Arctic Frontiers Conference in Norway. I'm very impressed, actually. I'm always very impressed by the seriousness that Norwegians have for the special concerns of the Arctic and for the safety requirements that the Arctic, this pristine place, gives on everybody else. In my own world, so Norway in a way is a kind of a guardian or a stalwart for Arctic concerns, and we've heard today that actually regional regulation may not be the solution to all of this, and so I think it's very important that Norway speaks up in all these global councils, such as the IMO and the MEPC, in order to protect the Arctic and actually with the Arctic mankind in a reasonable way. I would like to re-emphasize a few numbers, and I would start with the opportunity actually that Tor Christian actually close with. Shipping traffic in the Arctic has increased by 150% over the last 5 years, and it will increase further. In a way, it's ironic that climate change, the receding ice, creates a business opportunity, and because of that business opportunity, actually climate change will increase further. If not, we do something about it. We have heard that a large part of that shipping today, and if you don't do anything in the future, will run on heavy fuel oil. And we've heard about the detrimental effects of heavy fuel oils being responsible for black carbon emissions. And these black carbon emissions actually accelerate ice melt significantly. And if I'm sure you're aware of all the the consequences of climate change on the entire world and the rise of sea levels is a big one of that. And actually, so what we are seeing here in the Arctic, in this pristine place that we want to protect, has an impact on the entire world. Now, I do want to get to policy changes and what we can do about it. One way of thinking about it is if we basically increase the consciousness of everybody, so we have actually voluntary mitigation, a voluntary, basically voluntary action. That could be one way of thinking about it. But we think actually in a very competitive environment, such as international shipping and container shipping, voluntary action is not enough in order to have an effect. So in a competitive arena, it's important to have a level playing field, and this level playing field can only be created by global regulation. There's no other way for it. And actually, the Antarctica, as it has been voiced before, has set a clear precedent. Since a number of years, there is a ban of heavy fuel oil in the Antarctica, and we actually don't see why there is a reason to have that same regulation also for the Arctic, which basically means that at a global level, and the regulating agency is the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, under MARPOL, creates that ban for heavy fuel oil in the Arctic. Now, the question is, are there any other options? And the reason why we basically opt for the heavy fuel oil ban is that it's the most direct and effective mechanism for emission reduction and spill mitigation, like in the Antarctic and like in the Svalbard waters. And we would also think it's a low-hanging fruit. Yes, and it does need to be a regulatory because in the sense of level playing field, as Daniel from Hurtigruten said, it does increase the operating cost for the cruise ships or for the container traffic, but it basically these costs we are sure would be well accepted by the customers, knowing that actually they're paying for they're helping avoid a catastrophe, or potential catastrophes that would occur if heavy fuel oil was not banned in the Arctic. The alternative are emission control areas. They have been mentioned before, as they today exist in the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. And in a way, they contribute to a patchwork of local regulation. I mean, we would prefer, obviously, that there is a global regulation, and basically a heavy fuel oil ban in the Arctic basically assumes that the Arctic is one large emission control area. So, but actually, it will be a sidestep to a contribution of shipping at a global range to decarbonize basic activities on this globe, and to get to accomplishment of the Paris goals in 2050. So we are aware that actually replacing heavy fuel oil with other fuels such as LNG or such as lighter oils, which are less detrimental, are not the solution at the end. That other fully decarbonized solutions will be required, but we regard this as a very important first step in order to achieve fully environmentally control in the Arctic. We are aware. When we talk about heavy fuel oil, it's heavy fuel oil on use and carriage. That actually for heavy fuel oil as cargo, there may be some delays required until northern communities have reduced their dependence of HFO for energy and heating. Now, lately, there have been actually very important successes and pointers into the right direction. Effectively, the Polar Code, which actually has been gone in effect in January 2017, actually right now, introduces a recommendation for Arctic shipping to apply the same restrictions as in the Antarctica. End of 2016, President Obama, Prime Minister Trudeau, the Nordic ministers made a commitment to take action to reduce HFO. Growing sectors, business sectors in shipping industry, also join the movement, mainly from this region, as they are most conscious about the consequences of potential oil spills. Cruise line Hurtigruten, as we heard, already stopped using HFO in Arctic waters a few years back. The Arctic Expedition Cruise Operating Eco Association reconfirmed their ban on heavy fuel oil. The Danish Shipowners Association publicly called for a ban of use of heavy fuel oil, and we understand the Norwegian Shipowners Association is discussing this very issue, and as Tor Christian highlighted. There are alternatives which may be more expensive today, but there are alternatives on the fuel side, which are a stepping stone, because I mean, ultimately, the whole shipping industry, as regulated by IMO, and now taking actually a look or taking a serious effort to decarbonize completely until 2050, has alternative fuels for the time being. Low sulfur distillate and LNG, and there's plenty of gas in this area. So that should actually, the availability of that should actually not be an issue. So we are very much hearted that the Clean Arctic Alliance, which is a coalition of 15 non-for-profit NGOs spanning 12 countries, call for a ban of HFO use and carriage. Because in our mind, and we are very much convinced about this, with very many partners around the globe, the shipping industry needs to move away rapidly from fossil fuel shipping in order to cut risk of catastrophic oil spills and reduce both CO2 and black carbon emissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph. I realized while I was standing there listening to the presentations, I didn't explain who I am. I do apologize. My name's Sian and I represent the Clean Arctic Alliance, which, as Christoph has just said, is a coalition of 15 non-for-profit organizations. And what I'd like to do now is just spend a couple of minutes, no more, explaining a little bit more about the Arctic commitment, and then invite Hurtigruten and myself, if I can invite myself, to sign the Arctic commitment on behalf of the hosts of this work, of this side event. And then we'll go into a question and discussion session, and we can invite at the end anybody else that would like to come up and sign the commitment as well. I think much of what I was going to say about the commitment has actually already been said, so I'll be even briefer. It calls on businesses and organizations, community leaders, scientists, celebrities, anybody really that has a vested interest in the Arctic to step forward and to call for a phase out of the use of heavy fuel oil by ships in the Arctic. And the aim of this historic commitment is to both protect the Arctic communities and the ecosystems from the risks posed by the use of heavy fuel oil. Following today's launch, what we'll be doing is reaching out to those different communities, those different sectors, and encouraging further sign-up and adding to the groundswell of support for an IMO phase-out of heavy fuel oil by 2020. As we sort of get set up in order to go and sign the commitment, what I'd like to do perhaps is just turn it over to the panel for one question ahead of the question and answer session, and just ask anyone if they would like to just add any further words about what this commitment means for them and for the company or for the sector that they represent. And I apologise, I haven't put the microphone out there, but we have another microphone if anyone would like to step up first. Would anyone like to add anything at this stage?
Well, I have a clarification, if I may. I don't. Do you hear me back there?
It's for the, we're recording it.
Recording it, so
So-
I'm talking to this one.
That one, no,
That one.
this one. Sorry.
Good. So just a comment to IATO in Antarctica, which is regulating the Antarctic waters. We actually have the same kind of body for the Arctic, which is IECO. And the Director General is sitting over there, Frigg. But it's voluntary. So the operators like us is a member of IECO, and a lot of the other Explorer cruise operators are also a member, and our guidelines are extensive to operate in Arctic waters, and of course IECO is in favor of the ban of heavy fuel oil. But then Crystal Serenity is sailing through the Northwest Passage, as you're saying, and they carpet bomb small Inuit villages with 1,070 guests, because they're not a member of IECO and they haven't signed our guidelines. So the challenge is the regulation. So we need more regulations like we have in Antarctica, in the Arctic, so these kind of situations doesn't occur. So that was just a comment that the method and framework is there, but it's not for anyone than the members of IECO who is committed to following it.
Thank you. Right, if we can, then we'll invite Daniel to come over and sign the commitment. As saying, I'll be signing on behalf of the Clean Arctic Alliance, which includes Bellona and the European Climate Foundation, and then we'll get into the question and answer session. As I said earlier, for the question and answer session, we would please ask you to come and just ask your question from the microphone. So you want us both here? Go on.
Shall I sign?
Yeah, please do.
It's a pleasure. There you go.
Thank you. Right, I don't know how to do it without turning my back. I can't sign from here, though.
Then I move.
Thank you. Right. Can I ask then if there's anybody that would like to ask a question of the panel or to make any comments or statements to please put your hands up and please come over to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Ben Aliff, and I'm from Greenpeace International, and we would, of course, be delighted to sign the Arctic Commitment. Thank you to the panel for a fascinating discussion. I had a question in two parts, and the first, I suspect I may be not alone in asking, is that why on earth do you think it is that we're having to launch this campaign today, given the obvious risks of HFOs to the environment, all the talk about the growing shipping, amount of shipping, tourism, this supposed oil bonanza that we're seeing in the far north, and the obvious lack of infrastructure in many places? Why has there been such an absence of concerted and meaningful action in places like the IMO? And then related to that, what is it, do you think, that the energy, the momentum, and the pressure that's going to be created by this coalition, what is the best way of using that to create meaningful change in places like the IMO, perhaps other fora, as quickly as possible? Thank you.
Who would like to go?
Yeah, I could just start on commenting, at least on the first part there, and say that if I knew the answer to that, everything would be much easier, at least for an environmental NGO. But at least for regulations in the Arctic and a lot of issues related to climate change, it is a very big question of who wants to go first. The Arctic is a very good example of the tragedy of the commons as well. There really is, the Arctic. It's not my Arctic, at least for parts of that. That's, each country's ownership. But I think that nobody wants to go first. It's one of the big issues for many things related to climate change and large changes overall. We see that when you have large coalitions of international business or politicians saying that, yes, we are pro an international price on carbon. That's our target. That's what we work against. It's never going to happen. Sorry, guys. And if it is, it's going to be far into the future because nobody wants to take the first step, do the first mover risk, and actually accept that. And that's the difference, at least with this initiative here. Somebody wants to move forward, take the first step, and also take a first mover risk, knowing that it's going to cost you extra, but it's actually accepting that for the benefits. So having a coalition of NGOs and of industry doing that, hopefully will drive regulatory and politicians as well into accepting that we should have this in the Arctic, even though it's a regional regulation.
And to add on to that, I think you summarized it very well there. But it's another reason that we meet quite often, and it's knowledge. So when we meet politicians around in Norway, we say, you know, did you know it's allowed with heavy fuel oil on the Norwegian coast and in the Arctic? Wow, no, we didn't. So we need to create awareness around this. We need to tell the consequences, and we need to force regulations onto the ship owners who doesn't want to adhere to them. And the commercial interests are high. For Hurtigruten back in 2012, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. The company had been loss-making for a number of years, and it cost us approximately 120 million NOK, which is about 12 million pounds annually, to run on MSG compared to heavy fuel oil. And it was wide open to use heavy fuel oil and change to that. But we didn't. It's because we took a standing on it. But a lot of ship owners won't do this until they're forced to do it. IMO, speaking as a shipping company, a cruise company, has been extremely slow in order to start the discussions with the industry on this. Extremely slow. We've seen other industries being a lot faster to adapt to the changes. What I personally think will happen is that the customers of the big shipping companies will force them in this direction if IMO and regulations doesn't.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got quite a few hands going up, so I'm going to ask for another question, and then you can respond to either question if you like in a moment. First of all, first was the gentleman. Okay. Sorry, yes. Okay, would you like to go first? Thank you. No, there's a couple more as well, so go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alp. I'm from Istanbul, Turkey. I work in the financial sector. My question was on maybe the use of the word extra cost when we're marketing this. The way that many economists would put it is this is actually some sort of a subsidy that the public never agreed to begin with. It's a cost that was given involuntarily to the public. So I'm wondering if there's a better way to market this when we're saying you're going to pay an extra price, but it's the true price that they have to pay instead of a subsidized one. And the second question I had on marketing related was, you talked about the international voluntary standard for the Arctic. How can that be marketable so that the consumers are more aware of that?
Well, for when we made our film, we actually interviewed people that were coming off of cruise ships, just as an example. I'm sure you have the same experience. It's an amazing low price that people pay. It's really a competitive industry. The only way you can compete in that industry is by numbers, really. And it's very expensive to operate. When you ask the clients that come off the ships usually, now I'm not talking about Hurtigruten because I do actually think it has a different type of clientele, but let's say Carnival Cruise or Princess, these giant big ships. They did these questionnaires and asked these people, would you pay more if you knew that the ship was using a more sustainable form of fuel? And the answer was no. They would just go right to another competitor. It wasn't on their agenda. Now, it blows my mind that you can go on a Holland America ship, one of these giant ones with 5,000 or 6,000 people on them. No, they don't exist. The biggest one is 7,000, I think. So I would say 3,000 or 4,000. And you go from Seattle to Alaska, and you go through the Inside Passage, and you pass all these glaciers, and you're not willing to help preserve that. So there is a tremendous disconnect into what the client wants from the ship and what we actually can do. So that's not happening yet.
So we as an operator, we do market it. We put HFO on all the voyages we do in the Arctic. We put IATO on all the voyages we're doing in Antarctica. And we try to, all the voyages start with a lecture from the expedition team talking about the guidelines and how they shall behave in these waters, how they shall behave in the local communities of the Arctic, how they shall behave when they're on land in Antarctica, and this is made by IATO and HFO. The challenge is when someone doesn't want to be a member of these two organizations and wants to do their own show, and the cost of the voyage is significantly lower, because they don't train their staff and they don't use the right type of fuel and so on. That's when the challenge comes, and that's where the regulation needs to come into place. But as it is now, we have very lectured customers who are aware of it, and when we ask our customers, they are very aware that they choose a cruise line which is working with this.
I can say a few words about the other segments, others than the cruise ships, representing oil tankers, chemical tankers, what we call industrial shipping. Are the customers asking for these green services for the environmentally friendly ships? To a very small extent today. But as we say, tomorrow's winners are the most energy efficient and environmentally friendly ships. We believe that the market 2 or 3 decades ahead of us will ask for quite other services and quite other standards of their transportation of goods than the customers are doing today. But unfortunately, I have to say that today, the questions for environmentally friendly transport is locked more or less to the large car producers like Toyota, Mercedes, these large, giga-large manufacturers. And when we are talking about the other goods, the other containers, it's barely not asked for.
Hello, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. I think it's time for an engineer to enter the scene here. My name is Geir Kjersem. I'm from LMG Marine in Bergen. We are part of a Samcorp group of companies in Singapore. That's 2 degrees north of the equator. What I would like to just give the perspective from a ship designer and also shipbuilders, how we see it, because also the HFO ban, which is very attractive for many business people, should be followed up. And what I would like to give you a few words on LNG. Our company was the first to design LNG-powered ships here in Norway. It started off in 2007. It's been a huge success. LNG is cheap fuel. It's the most environmentally friendly carbon fuel you have, no sulfur. And also it follows the ECA regulations, which was just mentioned here. There has been a significant development since then. We have something like 20 LNG-powered ships in Norway today. We have proposed to the Norwegian government to put up an LNG bunkering station at Svalbard to be combined with a power station, because coal-fired power will be closed shortly. Why not use another different type of fuel? We believe that such a facility can be used also, in addition to being a power plant, it can also supply ships visiting Svalbard. But it runs on its own economy for local power generation. So we have sent this, a proposal to the Norwegian government, and in fact we need a bit of support. And then we will have it. But that's on pure commercial basis for such one. We see there is also in Singapore, we mentioned the ECA regulations, environmental control area, emission control area. There is, in fact, an increasing interest among many ship owners to go greener. The problem with LNG is the infrastructure. And this is something that we are working on. We believe that shortly we will have available technology, commercially attractive technology, to supply ships with LNG power. DNV, the Norwegian Institute, DNVGL, Classification Society estimates that by 2020 there will be something like 4,000 or 5,000 ships being run on LNG, provided it's available as a fuel. Even the container ships have shown interest to go, because they have a firm line, just like the ferries. They can go, they can fuel, and they can plan the bunkering. So there are hopes. But the regulations, and this is where we come to the ship owners, they are very often interested, and we see the Hurtigruten. They want a level playing field commercially. Then they can go. So the technology is here, it's available, it's commercially attractive. From the first LNG-powered ships we designed, there was an increase in capital expenditure in investments of 35%. Today we are down to 10%. And the fuel is cheaper. Very, very, from an energy point of view per kilo, it competes with FHO. Very attractive fuel. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to add or comment or respond?
Yeah.
Hallstein and then Sletner and Bernice. Frick, would you like to come and be ready?
Yeah, just very shortly. Good to hear from an engineer. I'm an engineer myself, so it's always nice to get that perspective. But it just goes to show that there are actually solutions, at least for new builds. Of course, LNG isn't an attractive option for the existing ships that should change tomorrow. But for new builds, it shows there are one of several solutions that can be there. And what we hope to see is to have a positive discussion on the alternatives as well. LNG being one, of course, methanol and other fuels that could be produced biologically in the future, and of course electrification as well. So there are several opportunities, but right now the first step would be to say we should at least toss out the most pollutive and the today cheapest fuel of them all, which keeps the business from moving forward.
Well, I think you said it all for us. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Well, yeah, I can actually join into the choir of engineers. So, yes, there are technologies available and they are actually commercially attractive. And that brings us back to the role of regulations and the level playing field. As some of you have said, the IMO over the last many years has not been acting very swiftly, to say the least. And the question was asked, why would we actually need an Arctic commitment or a campaign in the first place? Yeah? My sense is, having attended the last two of those sessions, the Environmental Committee of the IMO, that the tide is turning. At the last MEPC, so this is the Environmental Protection Committee of the IMO, most of the Arctic Council countries, actually all of them except for Russia, spoke up in the plenary and basically supporting the request of the Clean Arctic Coalition to bring this issue of heavy fuel oil ban to the next MEPC committee. The only way to regulate this is actually through the IMO. Yeah, so this is a regulatory body. So and there's no alternative to it. So building this campaign actually is an effort by NGOs to build coalitions, and without coalition building, we won't get anywhere. Yeah, and the coalition has to go much beyond Scandinavian countries or countries that see themselves as the guardians and stalwarts of the Arctic because they see it. I mean, they see it in front of them every day. Actually, majorities have to be gained, or in a way, the way IMO works, anonymity has to be gained at a global scale, that this is actually a key issue. So it was heartening that even the new Secretary General said he actually does have the Arctic in his as a priority, and so he would be open to that. So there's a lot more voices, actually, that have spoken out in favor of this. And this is now a process, yeah? So it's, the IMO is like a tanker, and it doesn't move fast, yeah? So it needs actually efforts time and again. And so we would be hopeful that at the next MEPC session, which is in July this year, that actually we will get the HFO ban on the Arctic. And why are we doing this? Because we need to build coalitions and we need progressive voices to supporting this. And otherwise, we don't get the regulations that create a level playing field for the industry.
Yes, I cannot join the choir of engineers. I am Frigg Jørgensen from the Association of Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators. And I'm honored to be here today to sign this commitment on behalf of 60 international members. This includes almost 40 operators and vessel owners internationally. Hurtigruten has shown the way in this initiative, but there is no disagreement in our association on signing this commitment. That being said, I totally agree with those who speak on behalf of an international regulation. It is necessary because we have tried the opposite. For very many years, there was a HFO ban in IECO. Members of IECO did not run on HFO. And they do not today either, most of them. But we do see that it is necessary for us to have an international regulation in this area for the competition to be fair across the industry. So with that, I will be honored to sign the commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Frigg. Go ahead on the panel, and then we have a couple more statements or questions coming in a second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and underlining the need for international regulations. Now I would actually take the very unpopular and challenging task to defend IMO. Because the reason why I say it is IMO is not an alien body we don't know. It's not a guy far from here sitting away and don't taking impulses at all. IMO is you and me. The nations of IMO, that's IMO. You can say that IMO is moving slowly, but it's the nation and their ability to agree on joint regulations. That's what's taking time. When you're challenging 190 nations to sign under one agreement valid for all over the globe at any time to protect the industry, to make a level playing field, to make the conditions equal for all, that takes time. And it's not because of IMO. It's because of the nations and the decision procedures that are in IMO. You are free to influence your politicians, your bureaucrats. I am myself a member of the Norwegian delegation to IMO, to MEPC, as mentioned here. I've been there several times. I'm not a fan of what IMO does at any time, but I know that it's not IMO that is the problem. It's the nations which are IMO in total. That's the problem. There are political conflicts. There are some who by principle don't agree with others. There are industries that don't work very well together. There are NGOs that doesn't have any kind of economic commitment to what they propose towards an industry which sits with the assets and takes all the economic consequences. What I mean to say is that's the world who is gathered in that room. 600-700 people sitting there. That's the IMO. That's the nations, and that's why it takes so much time.
Well, I, as a ship owner, do think the IMO is quite slow. So I think they could do a lot more work to get there faster. So I agree with the view of IMO being a big supertanker, being very, very, very slow to turn. But hopefully it's turning a little bit faster now than it used to. And what I do agree with is that the politicians need to be more aware of this, because the Norwegian government is pushing IMO in front of them and saying, you know, we can't do anything, it's an IMO decision. So okay, to go down there and tell them what you need to do. And get a coalition of the Arctic countries who actually are influenced by this every day. So, so it's definitely possible to get this impact faster through the governments into the IMO, but the IMO needs to be much faster to turn themselves.
May I respond to that? I actually think we really shouldn't wait for the IMO to make the changes happen, because when you look at industry, a lot of good things are already happening. You were talking about that the consumer cannot make a choice at the moment. Well, there's some really great initiatives, such as the Environmental Ship Index, for instance, in Sweden, who is really trying to touch the entire column of shipping, so from the ship owner to the product to the consumer. And it's, I think, a matter of time. You're the country of Teslas in Norway. I'm saying you, but presumably a lot of people here are from Norway. Oslo has the highest amount of Teslas driving in the world. Yeah. How do you think they get here? Do you think it's going to be with a ship that doesn't use HFO? No, they're coming here on dirty ships. And so when is everybody going to wake up and say, I'm going to buy a Tesla, but that Tesla then also has to come with a container ship that uses anything, or, you know, hopefully hydrogen or something else? I think that's a matter of time, and the consumer is going to be the one that is going to push that. And then there's going to be companies, such as Tesla, who are going to use that in their marketing. And then you'll see it can go really fast, and then we don't need an IMO to make that happen, because it will come from bottom up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ina Bellona. I'm working at the Arctic Council Secretariat here in Tromsø at the moment. I'm seconded there by Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland because of our upcoming chairmanship, both in Arctic Council and Arctic Economic Council. And as a Finnish diplomat, I just want to remind you of our priorities during our chairmanships. One is absolutely the environment protection. And as our Prime Minister said here in Tromsø 2 days ago, environment issues are going to be key issues for us, and then for Arctic Council, of course. And for example, reducing black carbon emissions is absolutely among of those actions we are going or trying to do together with all the member states and stakeholders. But now why I'm here, I'm actually speaking in behalf of Arctia, which is a state-owned ice-breaking company in Finland. And for that reason, I can also speak in behalf of it. It's one of the strongest actor in icebreaking field, and currently it has 8 icebreakers in its fleet. 2 of them, they are heavy multipurpose and research icebreakers with broad international experience. But I'm speaking here about this Polaris, however you want to say it. It's a new icebreaker. It joined to Arctia's fleet in last September, and it's the first icebreaker in the world capable of running on both LNG and ultra-low sulfur diesel. Polaris has also a totally integrated oil recovery system as a first icebreaker in the world. Arctia has declared already earlier that it supports the ban of HFO in the Arctic. And unfortunately, the CEO of Arctia, Mr. Tero Vauraste, who is also upcoming chair of the Arctic Economic Council, unfortunately he's not able to be here today, but he wanted to say that Arctia believes that dual fuel engines, LNG and inbuilt oil recovery systems are the future of cost-effective multipurpose icebreakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone of the panel like to comment or respond? Clive, I think you had a question. Are there any other questions or comments that want to come from the audience?
Hi, I'm Clive Tazar with WWF's Arctic program. And I just wanted to note for everybody here that we, of course, will be signing on to this commitment. And I also wanted to note something else that I've heard a little this afternoon. There's been a little discussion of cost and the extra costs involved with going HFO free. I'm not sure that we've really, perhaps because a lot of the people on the panel understand this, talked enough about the costs of not going HFO free. What is the cost of a cleanup of an HFO spill? We have modeled HFO spills. We see how far they go. We know how difficult they are to clean up. So the costs, the environmental costs that you'll see are quite large and cover a larger area than a lot of people might realize. The other cost, of course, though, is the almost incalculable cost to local livelihoods and local cultures. And so the question I have for the panel is thinking about those local livelihoods, those local cultures that are imperiled by the use of HFO, how much have you tried to engage those local communities to support this effort? And what sort of a difference do you think their voices would have?
I just want to thank for that perspective. It is a very important perspective as well, and it's one of the most difficult things to actually communicate, working pro environmental issues and stopping climate change. It is these costs we're talking about, internalizing external costs and all these things. And it's proven to be a very far away concept for many, at least if you're going to include the cost of something that might happen if you don't do another thing. We know that the cost of carbon or climate mitigation today as a whole is going to be lower than the cost we're going to have actually adapting to climate change in the future. That doesn't really make the big difference for politicians day to day or companies day to day, at least in most cases. And the same is true for things that could happen. The risks we see for oil exploration, for shipping, for activities in the Arctic as well. If something happens, and it could, and most likely it will at some point, the costs are going to be huge, devastating. They might change local communities forever. They might completely destroy the basis for livelihood they have today, at least indigenous people and local communities all around. So involving and also engaging local communities and the Arctic communities is of course a very important point and might be a good step to take in the future as well. So the first mover now has been the initiative from the business itself, having the voices of the ones who's actually going to do those changes we are proposing, saying that we are willing to go this way. And we'll have to take the next steps from there. But your point is very valid. The cost of not doing anything would be enormous.
There are discussions already with the Arctic Council and the indigenous people. We as operators work through IECO with the local communities to teach them about our operation and how we take their livelihood seriously, how we can impact them, and also this should be on the agenda when we talk to them. I think it's a really sad thing to see in Longyearbyen, where we are also a land-based operator in Longyearbyen. We are regulated extremely hard on our land-based operation on Svalbard, which is good. And our customers are taught this, so you can't be closer to a polar bear than this and that many meters. You can't change the behavior of the polar bear and so on, which is a good thing, very regulated. But at the same time, you sail a 4,000-bed cruise ship loaded with 65,000 tons of heavy fuel oil into Longyearbyen. So it's just not hanging together. So we need to teach also the local communities, the politicians, about this really strange situation.
Thank you for your question, Clive. I'll answer it in two ways. I believe, as we have heard here, that the Arctic Council and others are engaging the indigenous people in the Arctic area. So I think they have a really good contact. I know for sure that an oil spill operation, when coming to costs, I know for sure that an oil spill operations in the Arctic will be extremely expensive, both for the environment and for one or another's bank account. It will cost a fortune, and we can't even overlook the costs of what it will be now. But I will mention one thing that will probably gain the initiative for banning HFO in the Arctic, and that's the latest IMO regulation on reducing the sulfur content in heavy fuel oil from 3.5 down to 0.5. That's a very efficient type of regulation, which will make heavy fuel oil unattractive in the substance as it is today, with that type of viscosity and with that type of sulfur content. That means that heavy fuel oil have to be developed more to be some kind of low sulfur HFO or something along those lines. But that means that these bunkers will be more expensive. And that will, in a way, and maybe even on a short-term basis, close the gap of the costs between that type of low sulfur fuel and diesel. That's something that will gain the initiative for banning HFO, because we believe in the decades to come, HFO will be a less attractive bunker to use, because you can't use it in that cheap content as it is today. And the development with respect to bunkers in shipping will take on speed in the years to come. That's for sure. Hydrogen, methanol, LNG, electricity, batteries, all types of new kind of propulsion in ships will come up, as we've seen from the spearhead here and at the Hurtigruten.
Well, I think also along those lines that the subject you brought up is, at least that's what we were hearing a lot when we were doing our research for the film, was that it's not that easy, because a lot of the communities that live on the Arctic coast still depending on some way or form of diesel, and they put it in diesel generators. And if we are going to take away, that type of fuel from them, then what are they going to get it replaced with? So that was particularly the Russian communities, very difficult to come up with something alternative. And the other thing I'm interested in is, what are we going to do with HFO if we don't put it in ships? What are we going to do with all that stuff? I mean, we make asphalt, we make shingles on roofs, and it goes into ships, and the ships are the major, the majority of it goes into ships. So are we going to just keep processing it over and over again to make something else of it? Well, that costs a lot of energy. So are you really gaining in your climate, in your CO2 reductions, if you refining it to make something else? So it's not that easy to get rid of HFO, and those are two of the things that we've been hearing that is, a major obstacle.
Thank you. As moderator, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative for a moment, if I may, as well. Just to respond to the question about indigenous voices, this week, working with a particularly strong indigenous voice, a colleague of ours, Austin Amasuk, we have an op-ed placed in Arctic Now. And last year, towards the end of last year, at the last IMO MEPC meeting, we took six indigenous voices, six representatives of indigenous communities to the IMO, and allowed them to use our platform there to have their voice heard. This was the first time this had ever happened. They don't have a platform at the IMO, they don't have access, and they haven't been able to have their voice there and being heard. I think as a result of them coming to the IMO, to MEPC last October, there is a strong likelihood now that they will be given an opportunity to take part in those discussions going forward in their own right, which is obviously important because we don't always have the same views. And I think it's important that they're there with their own opportunity to speak how they feel and to tell it how it is from their perspective. Thank you. Did any of the panel, any others want to speak? Are there any other questions or comments from the audience? Right, well, as we wrap up, I'd like to invite anybody else that's spoken up that would like to come and sign the Arctic Commitment. One thing I'm conscious of, we haven't read it out, so if you haven't sat far enough forward to see a copy of this leaflet, the full text of the commitment is in here. Please come and help yourself to a copy. We understand that not everybody, that there may be some people who feel interested in signing up, but perhaps aren't able to make that commitment here today. So there are contact details on here to be able to follow up. And I'd just like to, as we invite people to come forward, to say, please, don't rush. We'd like to get a photo of anyone that is able to come forward and sign the commitment today. And also to recognize that we've had a couple of messages come in today from, in particular, Louis Pugh, who is the UN patron of the oceans, who has given us his commitment that he is going to sign. And also from the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, who have been here and spoken vocally in many of the sessions this week, but unfortunately aren't here today. And they also have committed to signing the commitment. Finally, then, just for me to wrap up, I'd just like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Bellona, Hurtigruten, and the European Climate Foundation for hosting the side event this afternoon, and also just to point out that there are probably still wraps and drinks at the back, so please feel free to help yourself. I'd also like to thank all of the panelists for giving up your time and for coming and speaking so eloquently and answering the questions and the comments, and to thank also the audience for participating and offering your own thoughts and thinking about this. I had a list of my own questions just in case nobody spoke. I'm not going to raise them now. I think they've all been covered anyway. But thank you very much.
Hej. Må jeg genere dig et sekund? Ja, det går fint. Jeg er journalist. Ja. Jeg skriver til den danske og den grønlandske presse. Og så, men jeg vil skrive en bog om Grønland og Danmark og fremtiden. Og turismen spiller en vigtig rolle. Og jeg ved, I har nogle idéer og planer i Grønland. Ja, mange. Ja. Er du her i morgen overhovedet? Nej, jeg drar server nå om en time. Hej. Jeg er ved at skrive på Danmark og Grønland og fremtiden, og turismen spiller en meget stor rolle i grønlandske tankefelt. Kan vi lave et interview på Skype? Ja, det kan vi. Så hvis Thomas har kontakter, så finner jeg, for han er kommunikasjonssjef hos oss. Så da setter vi opp et Skype-intervju på det. Vi tror at vi har et veldig stort potensial for den type sustainable tourism som vi snakker om her. Som kan, i dag er det fiske by far den største industrien på Grønland. Reiseliv kan bli men på en sustainable måte. Og det er det vi ønsker å utvikle der. På lik linje med det vi gjør på Svalbard og på norskekysten, hvor vi skaper arbeidsplasser i communityen som vi ser ut. Så ta gjerne et spørsmål på det. Super! Ja, kjempebra! Ja, det blir jo kjempefint. Det burde jo vært underlig. Det er det jo ikke.
Can I work for you?
Yes.
Please.
You should come sail with us and do lectures.
Yeah, I do that.
Oh, with us?
No, I I saw you guys on the ocean ride.
Oh yeah. And what is great? I mean the systems and the calls.
That's not awesome.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah, all the
but it should be regulated in the Arctic. And I'm so happy you mentioned this because I think that
wasn't it?
disaster.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your Turkey award. Yes. I'm a big fan of your company. I'm glad to hear. I've been actually one of those tourists, probably more educated tourists, and I've come on the ship too, actually on the cruise from Havåg No, it's just so you know, we're very proud of the company. Not the least of our work now. No, I think it's an iconic brand. So the first time which one did you go on that? Which one? No, that was basically one of those, you know, regular. It's a cruise. It was not a cruise. It should be. I was studying at the time in Trondheim as an engineer, and then going from Trondheim to Bergen. Yeah, and then I just took the boat. Oh, very nice. It was very nice. I'll have to go to the plane for a meeting. Yes. Will you be on the Scandinavian Airlines flight? No, I'm Norwegian flight. Okay. Okay. All right. I will be going to Oslo actually. The 1840. I think it's 850. Yes. Yeah? I'm on the 835. 735. Okay. It was good meeting you. Yeah. Fredrik, gratulerer. Ja.